Greetings, pop pickers, and welcome to episode 166 of Mark's Notcast. Today I am going to be talking about the finest songwriting duo that ever came out of Britain, better than Lennon and McCartney, better than Morrissey and Marr. It is Pet Shop Boys, and I'm going to be talking about their 2016 album, their 18th album, Super. Putting it technically, it's a banger. The last episode, I talked about Oasis. Some of you didn't like that. That's okay. The world is full of opinions. Many of them are very different to mine. These episodes, I talk in a lot of respects about my personal relationship to the music that I love and the records that I own. And obviously my experiences are not going to be the same as everybody else's. Which means that when I was talking about my experiences of being at Oasis, a lot of people, they didn't have that experience. And in some respects, I'm really kind of jealous. But on the other hand, it's a big world and we wouldn't want to walk it. Today, talking about 2016's album by the Pet Shop Boys. It's called Super. It really, really is super. This, I think, was their 18th studio album, which they'd released in 30 years. So the band have been pretty damn prolific. And they've never had a period where they've split up. They've never had a period where they've disappeared from the public eye. I think the longest period they've ever gone without kind of like seeing each other in the flesh is a few months. And that's driven exclusively by the COVID pandemic, where hardly anybody saw anybody. I think the longest period of time before that, where they hadn't worked together, was they had 2 months off once, which is a very long period of time indeed. To put a bit of context around Super, at this point in their career, Pet Shop Boys were probably established as national treasures, which is a terrible phrase and comes with a whole host of connotations. But personally, I think of them as one of the finest musical exports that Britain's ever given the world, actually. They've just kept going. And what they've done, unlike a lot of other bands, as they've got older, they've become less and less relevant, and they've started to either kind of lose some kind of connection to the reality that everybody else lives in, or they've become so kind of enamoured in their own hype that they've become self-mythologizing. Now, Pet Shop Boys have done that to an extent. They operate in their very own pet shop universe. When you listen to them or you see them, you kind of understand that to an extent, everything that Pet Shop Boys do is completely separate and outside of the rest of the universe. To an extent, they've created their own artistic identity and have operated within that. But at the same point, they seem very grounded. And their music seems very grounded as well. And what this album does is that it kind of talks about and sings about what's it like to be, an older man in the world and to make sense of the world around it. And one of the things that always attracts me to music is it helps me kind of make sense of the world that I'm living in. And the world that I'm living in is by its very essence not very, doesn't always make sense. There's not an overarching narrative to life as such. There are random events that happen. There's not a beginning, a middle, and an end, apart from in terms of strict chronology, the beginning being school, the middle is the bit where you're working and becoming an adult, and the end is when you're, clearly coming to the end of your life. And what Pet Shop Boys is doing with this is they're trying to make sense of what is it to be a 60-something man in this world, and how do you live with it. So Super, for me, is one of their best albums. It is the second album of a trilogy of albums that they recorded with a producer called Stuart Price, who I think is also known as Les Rhymes Digitales, which is a phrase I've never pronounced before, apart from possibly a previous episode. And all the songs on this album, with one exception, were written between November 2014 and July 2015 in a very concentrated burst of songwriting. The song that wasn't is the first single from the album. The first single from the album is called Pop Kids, and I love the Pop Kids. It's one of the best Pet Shop Boys songs that there is. As you can probably tell, I haven't actually opened this 12-inch in a number of years, and in fact, I'm not sure I've ever actually opened it. Oh no, I definitely have. There's the inner sleeve to the Pop Kids. What you can see here is at this point is the whole of this album is built upon a strong visual identity of text and identity and colours within circles. It's a kind of like a branding decision around it. It's on a stunning piece of white vinyl. What we're really getting to here is actually a triumph of design. Is Pet Shop Boys are presenting songs and presenting singles as almost artistic pieces of presentation and decoration in their own right. This is the 12-inch single of Pop Kids on white vinyl. It's backed with, well, it's got 4 remixes on, and it's got a version called The Full Story, which is the full unedited version of the song, The Pop Kids. And I want to kind of talk about why I think Pop Kids is such a good song, because it really is. So it was released as a 12-inch and a CD. Pet Shop Boys, like a lot of bands, have a very good understanding of their demographic. Who's a Pet Shop Boys fan? How much money have they got? What do they do? How old are they? What are they interested in? And then, the band try to understand that when they make an offer. And so the offers that they make when they release singles is they know their fans like music that you can hold. They know their fans like something that you can touch and that you can feel, a tangible object, and they try and tie that in with the presentation standards that the band have. Obviously, I talked a lot about this on the episode where I talked about U2's Acton Baby, and they still do CD singles, and as you can see here, the inside gatefold of the CD single effectively replicates the inner sleeve of the 12-inch. Again, the Pop Kids single has a kind of like lime green kind of colour to it. So each of the different formats that we have for Pop Kids, each of the different formats that we've got for Super and some of the other singles, tie into a certain set of colours. So you can kind of see various colour coordinations stick with various formats. Streaming versions of these singles, by the way, come in different colours, and it come in different colours according to, for example, download stores, or where you're buying the download from, or which format you're getting. So it might be if you went to Amazon Music, it would be a light blue. It might be if you went to Google Play, it might be a bright yellow, for example. These are conscious design decisions that are made to create some kind of unified visual identity that runs all the way through it. And as you can see from the t-shirt that I'm wearing, that also translated through to merchandise, which I bought this t-shirt at the first show of the band's Inner Sanctum tour, which supported the Super album. So Stuart Price, producer for the album Super, worked on the albums both before and after it, the album Electric preceding it, and the album Hotspot that was released afterwards. And the Pop Kids is, in my opinion, although it was the lead single from the album, it wasn't the first track that was released from the album. The first track that was heard from the album was called Inner Sanctum. And Inner Sanctum is both the name that lends itself to the 3-year tour that supported the album, and also it was the name of the live concert DVD, Blu-ray and CD that was filmed at the Royal Opera House in 2018. And the Pop Kids being the song, the first song that people heard, I want to kind of address why that song, I think, is absolutely the right choice to be the first single from the album and not Inner Sanctum. The Pop Kids, to me, draws a very clear comparison. It's almost like a sequel to Can You Forgive Her? So Super, much like Very, has a title that indicates some degree of exceptionalism, something that's exaggerated beyond the normal, out of the usual. So, for example, super, very, they're both words which are used to describe something that is beyond your normal expectations. And much like Very, Super is, to me, it's an album about falling in love. And the best part of falling in love, of course, is the staying there. And there's an element of that goes in the rest of the album as well. So to me, Super is an album about falling in love and staying in love with somebody as an older man. When all popular culture seems to be aimed towards young people falling in love and having mad, rampant sex of the type that just seems very, very tiring when you're a little bit older. And the Pop Kids, to me, feels like it's a sequel to Can You Forgive Her, which is a bold move, but hear me out. Both of the albums have a link in the use of orange as a colour. They're both called Super and Very. Can You Forgive Her is about a younger man who finds himself in some kind of bizarre love triangle. And the Pop Kids is a song about an older couple, or two older people looking back upon their lives as younger people when they were lovers. So it's a sequel in many ways to Can You Forgive Her? And the idea being is that it's sort of a sequel to Vocal. It's sort of a sequel to Can You Forgive Her? And it's about, being grown up and looking back at being one of the Pop Kids who was into, discos and dance music in the 90s. Do you remember those days, the early 90s? We both went away when we went to university to UThe. I was it something, and then when you majored in biology, to you the human body was no mystery, kind of implying that there's a degree of carnal knowledge about the human body that's in that lyric, and there's an understanding of sexuality. But also at the same point, there's a wonderful line is about talking to others as though we knew that rock was overrated. Now, there's a line in Can You Forgive Her where they sing, well, you dance to disco because you don't like rock. Those are not coincidences. There's a degree of thought inside the lyric to the Pop Kids that kind of indicates that this is the couple that perhaps split up around about the time of Can You Forgive Her and are picking up the story as nostalgic but distant friends, 30, 20 years later. It's a great conceit. Hardly anybody does it, but I think that one of the great things about a lot of Pet Shop Boys songs is they're not written from personal experience; they're written from personal observation. Hence, the line in "So Hard" about "We've both given up smoking, so whose matches are those?" which apparently was overheard by Neil from a conversation with a friend of his around when he found out that perhaps his partner or one of his friend's partners was cheating. And these are deliberate decisions, and the Pop Kids comes in two forms. The full story, which is on the 12-inch and the CD single, is absolutely the version to get. It's got an extra verse in it that picks up the story of the two characters decades later and kind of gives some kind of closure to the narrative which is laid out in the rest of the song. And Pop Kids was written in 2011 when the band were on tour with Take That. They would do an hour in the stadium and then they'd have the rest of the day free, so they'd spend the time writing. And as I've said, it's kind of like a sequel to both vocal, because it's a song about pop music. Every track has a vocal, and that makes a nice change. And also, it's a sequel to Can You Forgive Her? So the Pop Kids was a fantastic first single, in my mind. Although, obviously, as soon as you start mentioning that you're a pop kid, you do sound very much like Steve Buscemi. And you go, hey, how do you do, fellow kids? Wearing a t-shirt that mentions a generic rock band. So here we have the inner sleeve here of Super, the album, which followed not long after. Just to give you a theory around how this is presented as a mass-produced work of art. You pick it, every element of it is designed as an experience, and lo and behold, the album comes on white vinyl. It's a fantastic pressing, by the way. Some copies do skip. But what I would say also about the album is I think the sequencing is really, really important to an album, and I think the sequencing on Super is it's suboptimal in my opinion. I think it could be a heck of a lot better. In fact, I think the album would make more sense if you started with side 2 rather than side 1. So the sequence that we've got from the album opens with, and this is a theme that runs all the way through the album, a very minimal track that almost explores just a series of rotations on a set of musical motifs. It's a track called Happiness, which also kind of takes a cue from the track Happiness is an Option from 1996. And also spells out the title Happiness in much the same way as Minimal does on the Fundamental album in 2006, and Shopping does on 1987. Actually, these are conscious decisions to tie back to the band's previous work and present the work in a new light. So they're very aware of this stuff, and at the same point, it's there if you want to look for it, and if you just want to dance to it, it sounds banging on big speakers with lasers. And like Very, Super is an album that is built on an exaggeration and excess. It's built upon the concepts of falling and staying in love. And it's built upon, like, for example, when you think about something that's super, you think about something that's superficial, you think about something that's superlative, you think about Superman, Superwoman, you think about all these things. So it's kind of like okay, we're living in exaggerated times at the moment. And also at the same point, going, even reality isn't satisfactory enough. It's not really real, and you need something that's more real than real, or even better than the real thing. So Super is an album that for me, it almost fulfills its mission statement. It's a big, bouncy, almost outsized version of Pet Shop Boys. And as I've said before, and you can kind of see it in here, is I've always regarded Pet Shop Boys as thinking about themselves almost as the Gilbert and George of disco. They're kind of like objects around which various events happen, and they present themselves as passive observers, viewing with not a degree of ironic detachment, with a degree of safety, the world around them that perhaps can be a confusing and weird place. So Happiness is the opening track on the album, and as I said, it's a minimal exploration of a number of underlying musical motifs, and nearly instrumental tracks with very, very minimal vocals is actually pretty much the template for the whole of Super. So it reminds me of bands like Nights Ebb, the Ramones, people like that. Very minimal songwriting, short, vocal lines, a lot of very quick, high number of notes in a short period of time, instrumental stabs that are very, very clearly pop music, but pop music written by very clever people. So the songs may appear to be very simple or even simplistic or maybe even stupid, but they're simple in a very smart way. They're sophisticated in a very simplistic manner, and there's a real skill in presenting a huge amount of information in a very short, compact kind of unit, and this is exactly what these songs do. So I'm thinking of a song like Groovy, like Pazzo, a number of other songs. They've got a very small number of words in there that almost are chosen for their repetitive qualities. As I've said, second track on the album is Pop Kids, which is the sequel to Can You Forgive Her. So Happiness is kind of going, right, so you've got an option around this, is to be happy. You can choose to interpret the events that are happening around you. As Reg Holdsworth from Coronation Street said, it is not us to what which cards we are dealt with, how we play them. And of course, you can't go far wrong with quoting Reg Holdsworth from Coronation Street, or can you? He's almost as reliable as Oscar Wilde. And Pop Kids is, the second song on the album, very clearly kind of laying out, this is who we were, this is where we came from, this is who we used to be. We were kids in the 90s that went to university, and they ended up in London and followed their obsession to the music scene. Wherever we went, whatever we did, we knew the songs. This is what Super is about, really. It's and the album in its current structure is almost built upon having a structure that follows narratively through the course of a person's life. So track 3 is 20 something, and by the way, I'll say I think the sequencing on the album is very off. I would change it dramatically, but 20 something picks up the story of the people that are in the Pop Kids, and to an extent, the Pop Kids is people as older people now looking back on who they were when they were younger. And 20 something also does the same thing of kind of addressing people that are 20 somethings, maybe looking at people they didn't know and going, so you're a 20 something now, this is where you are in your life. You're starting to build memories, you're starting to build relationships, loves, mythology. If you're a couple, you have your own shorthand, you have your own words, your own phrases, which have their own meaning, which to other people have no kind of meaning whatsoever. But every couple that has ever been has its own secret little set of signals, these little words, these glances, these phrases, these noises, which don't mean anything to anyone else, but have a shorthand between two people, in much the same way as twins sometimes have their own language that only exists amongst each other. Nobody else really understands it. A couple has that same secret language, and 20 something and Pop Kids kind of start to address those type of things as well. Fourth track on the album is Groovy, and the lyrics are quite simple. Look at me, I'm just so groovy. Feeling good, in the mood, the state I'm in, always will, dressed to kill, let the show begin. It's a very, very minimal lyric, it's only a handful of lines, and there's maybe 14, 15 words in the whole thing. And as a song, it's this huge, bouncy, somewhat distorted, slightly broken pop. You might listen to it and go, it sounds like a kind of detuned radio, but it's a stylistic decision to kind of play back pop music, but not to get it quite right. Track 5 is The Dictator Decides, which is a brilliant song, has been played live almost every show of the 2016 to 2018 tour, and really acted as almost like a palate cleanser. And The Dictator Decides is, in my opinion, one of the strongest songs on the album. It's a very political song, but it's political with a small p. It had a very different meaning when I saw it in 2016 to when I saw it in 2018. In 2018, we had Donald Trump, who in some people's eyes was nearly a dictator of America at that point, who was obsessed with power and money and influence. And when you think about that, you then go, well, how many yachts do you need to ride behind? How many mansions do you need to have? How many billions do you need to have in the bank to get rid of that gnawing sense of insecurity which lives at the heart of you? And as the Neil sings in The Dictator Decides himself, it says, it must be such a relief to put me out of my misery. It would be such a relief not to give another speech, is the line that's in there. Is it somebody that's become a dictator and they don't even want to be, in the way that maybe Kim Jong-un or perhaps maybe a member of a hereditary royal family would go, a prince becoming a king would go, actually, I never wanted this. This isn't who I am, but this is who I've been forced to be by the reality around me. And then end of track side 1, track 6, Pazzo. Again, a very, very minimal song, which just has the lyric, Pazzo, you're crazy. Do you want to? Do you want to go Pazzy? That's insane. That's insane. Pazzo. And again, there's something to be said for having a very, very minimal set of lyrics. Switch the album over. Side 2, Inner Sanctum, first single released from the album, although it was only really a download and a stream for Inner Sanctum. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the Pet Shop Boys' best songs of all time, fantastic opener, should be the opening track on the album. Because Inner Sanctum just has the lyric, in the Inner Sanctum you're a star, the girls, the guys, they all know who you are. And really it's a song about invitation, going, I am going to take you on a journey into a secret world, a world that most people don't access. That world, in the Inner Sanctum, you're a very important person to me, and that journey could be let's go, let's do it, let's fall in love. And so that's why I have that song as the opening song of the album, because to me Super is a concept album about falling and staying in love in a way in which many other albums don't really tend to capture. Side 2, track 2 is Undertow. Undertow being the 4th single from the album, is a big, that chunky song built on house rhythms. It's got lots and lots of just very short, minimal instrumental bursts and motifs that repeat themselves all the way through. And what a lot of people don't necessarily talk about is about the layering that we've got to the songs. So some of the layering here that we've got is fantastic, because each song is built and structured to the point where it almost looks like, like a tower made out of Tetris pieces, and you just add extra bits on until the point where it's completed, and then that's it. That song is a sonic sculpture that's been built perfectly, and it's fulfilled all the parts of its destiny. It's explored all the possible permutations of the songs that have been presented as it goes through. Also, you can dance your nuts off to some songs like Inner Sanctum, Undertow, Burn, Pop Kids. These are brilliant songs, and they sound fantastic when cranked up very, very high in dark rooms with low ceilings. And alongside Happiness in Inner Sanctum, we've got Pazzo, and we've got Undertow, and they're very minimal lyrics around these. They're almost instrumental. And Pazzo, by the way, I'm going to go back to that really, is a song that was made up out of other parts of other songs that the band kind of went, well, they weren't really working in those particular songs. We're going to put those songs to one side. They were working, in fact, on Monkey Business. So when they were working through an early version of Pazzo, for example, Chris was working through a remix of Pazzo, an alternate version. It then became the track Monkey Business, which appears on the Hotspots album, which was released in 2020. So in some respects, Monkey Business is almost an alternate version of Pazzo, and those all things, they all relate into each other. But I'm going to talk about Undertow, 4th single from the album. It was released as a 12-inch. With a bunch of remixes. The remixes include the Tough City Kids remix, which is crap, and the Tough City Kids dub mix, which again not amazing. And it's also backed with the super version of Left to My Own Devices, which is a re-recording of Left to My Own Devices, which follows the same arrangement that the band played on tour, as well as also a remix by Baba Stills of Burn. Burn was meant to be the 4th and final single from the album. It wasn't, because there was a fire in a nightclub in December 2016, and the band decided not to release a single where the chorus was, we're going to burn this disco down. The other interesting thing about this album, I should point out, by the way, Undertow also did get a very limited CD single pressing included in the Pet Shop Boys annual, but I'm running ahead of myself in terms of chronology there, is that as an album, I listened to this today. I watched the live show yesterday. It really reminds me of almost like a peak modern day kind of recasting or influence of things like Giorgio Moroder, parts of Daft Punk, parts of disco, house, electronica, all this stuff, all kind of thrown together into a mix to create something new. And when a lot of bands get older, let's be honest, they turn a bit crap. They lose the fire, and then making music becomes a habit as opposed to a compulsion, or as opposed to an artistic endeavour. Some bands, they stop exploring, they start repeating old ideas. Whereas with Super, what they're doing is they're now kind of taking, well, what's the best stuff that we've done before, and they kind of distill it into some kind of ultra version Pet Shop Boys and then present themselves as older statesmen, but looking with not a detachment, but with the benefit of maturity and experience that perhaps you wouldn't have had if they were releasing this album 30 years previously in 1986. So, as I've said, Inner Sanctum, first track, side two. It's very, very similar to a track called The Age of Love, and in particular reference to, there's a remix of Age of Love by Jam and Spoon, which you could slot inside Super Inner Sanctum, and you wouldn't necessarily know the difference. And in fact, I think there's a remix called JCRZ who has done that, created the Age of Love remix of Inner Sanctum that I will link to, that is absolutely fantastic and sounds like nothing so much as an extended version of Inner Sanctum. There's also, by the way, a fantastic chord change in the bridge to Super. So you think, some bands, when they have a chorus, they'll put a key change in, they'll lift the song up, and then that emphasizes to you that's the chorus. It's a trick that you can see in a lot of Nirvana tracks, a lot of Pixies tracks, some Oasis ones as well. The bit where the song suddenly lifts and you go, that's the chorus. Well, in Inner Sanctum, the key change is in the bridge, which makes you then think, so the chorus of the song is actually an instrumental break with no lyrics left in it. It's a fantastically cheeky move, and actually what people don't really, I think, give or ascribe enough credit to is the fact that Super is a fantastic instrumental album, and if there's a Pet Shop Boys album that really deserved an instrumental version to be appended to it as a bonus disc, in my opinion, Super is the one. I know a lot of people don't like the production on Super or by Stuart Price because they think it's lacking in subtlety, but to me, actually, what they're doing is they're painting very delicate and subtle things with very, very broad brushstrokes and being able to get away with it because you can still recognise what those songs are. Side 2, track 2, Undertow, fourth single. I've mentioned it before. I think this is one of the finest songs that they've ever done. It's got this brilliant kind of concept about it, is that actually you're being, dragged in by an undertow. You can't escape it. Like when Titanic sang. If you watch the film with James Cameron and Leonardo DiCaprio, for me the most terrifying thing about Titanic wasn't anything that was shown on screen. It was that sheer volume of weight, of power that was sucking people. Because what you do, you put like a ship that big and it sinks, it sucks people under, even if they've tried to swim away from it. Just the force of having that object, the gravitational pull that sits alongside it. Undertow is around being caught in the orbit of and gravitational pull of something that you can't escape. There's an undertow pulling me to you. It's pulling me down. I've got to pursue you. And there's an undertow whenever you're around. Now, it's been quite a while since I've fallen in love. But I remember it as clearly as yesterday, that moment when you see someone and all of a sudden, you think there's a universe in their eyes, and you think that there is nothing I want to do other than be around this person. And the compulsion as an emotional human being, there's no logic to love. Love comes quickly, whatever you do. You can't help falling, and Undertow kind of ties in with that concept, that theme, that idea around it, which is actually sometimes your eyes meet and then you just know that person is a thing in your life. An important role is going to be played by somebody, and you don't even know before they walk in the room that was the thing that you were missing, and then they walk in the room and you meet them and you go, that's what I've been missing all my life. And Undertow has that kind of insistent, almost compulsive, propulsive, in kind of hammering away at you to go, yes, that is, that's a person that you need to be with. And that's a lovely feeling. I'm very lucky to have experienced it more than once in my life. And the song manages to capture the kind of almost out of control element of it, where you go, I can't help but feel how I feel. I can't help but want to be, attracted to and drawn to this human being. That's I can't escape. It's kind of giddy. It's exciting. It's slightly scary, but you can't help it. And as the lyric says, "Save me! I can't help it. I'm sinking. Help me get away. But even as I speak these words, I know I'm going to stay." And it's a powerful song, and you can dance your legs down to the knees to it. And I think it's a brilliant song, actually. But it's in the wrong place on the album. Track 4, Sad Robot World, by the way. A very, very minimal lyric sits alongside Sad Robot World, I think, in my opinion. And it's not my favourite song on the album at all. And then you've got Say It To Me, which was the second single from the album, um, which is about the power of human communication between each other. So, moving beyond telepathy to communicating feelings to make a relationship successful. The flip side of that is Sad Robot World, where Neil is assigning feelings and emotions to objects like automation, which always reminds me of the cliche when I think was it one of the motor factories wanted to automate their factory, is that the union worker said, "And will the robots buy your cars?" at the end, and that kind of really kind of indicates the way that I think people were thinking. But Say It To Me is about the power of communication to make relationships work. That's 2 tracks on the album. Track 11, Burn. Absolute banger. Cannot describe it any other way. Fantastic, propulsive lyrics. It's got kind of like the beginning of it sounds very much like the beginning of Why Don't We Live Together from Police. So it ties back into the earlier songs. And it's all it kind of like the lyric is around, we're going to burn this disco down before the morning comes, and I think part of that uses the metaphor of dancing for sex, but also that idea is that when you're close to another human being and you can feel the heat of their body, and you go, that's wonderful. They feel the warmth like a ready brick glow, but then you go, going to burn this disco down before the morning comes with the power of our dancing or whatever it is. It's one of the best Pet Shop Boys tracks, if I was changing the sequence for the album, and I'll present my alternate sequence in a few minutes, I definitely would put this as probably the 3rd track on the album. And then the last one is Into Thin Air, which takes a kind of a bastardisation of a line from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and kind of presents itself almost like the end of a relationship, the end of a life. And we're talking about, the narrative structure of a life, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Into Thin Air is very clearly around, shall we get away from here where no one will find us? The north wind will blow us away. Into thin air will vanish, and no one will know where. And that if there's no other place you can end the album than that. Now I would change the sequence of this album substantially. I would go Inner Sanctum first. The invitation in the Inner Sanctum. I'm giving you an invitation to join this world, to come into this world, and experience all the things being a very important person to me. And then the second track would be Undertow. The ending of Inner Sanctum kind of ends on a hard disco stop, and boom, 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 boom. But Undertow starts with this fantastic drum roll and this huge chunky bunch of rhythms, which sound like they've always existed. As soon as you hear them, you go, "How come nobody else has ever written a song using that riff?" It's fantastic. Third song I'd make would be Burn. And then the 4th song would be the Pop Kids. So you've got a narrative that goes through the first 4 songs in my sequence of the album. Inner Sanctum being the invitation, Undertow being the compulsion, Burn being the consummation of this, and the Pop Kids being the fact that it's moved beyond the initial kind of meeting, lust, attraction to a relationship. And then I would put Groovy, which ties in with Groovy and Pop Kids, because Pop Kids is obviously about music and Groovy is about, well, look at us, we're dancing, we're groovy. And then we'd have The Dictator Decides as a kind of a stop to that, a moment where you go, am I in too deep? Is this something I want to be in? Flip over to side 2, Pazzo, because it's silly, Happiness, because happiness is an option, Sad Robot World, because you've got happiness and sad next to each other, and then Say It To Me, and then you've got what's the other track that I haven't mentioned so far, 20 something, and then Into Thin Air. And that would be my preferred sequence for the album. But really, I've got to tell you, I think Sepia is a fantastic record. It's one of the best Pet Shop Boys albums. It's probably in my top 5. I know I've done a ranking on some previous episodes. I can't remember where I put this in there. As I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the designs that we've got for the albums, we've got a kind of orange and green for the LP, you've got a pink and yellow for the CD, and you've got for the other various versions, the download options and so on. So that follows itself out. It's a very minimalist single word design. And the CD booklet is effectively a kind of like almost like a truncated panelled version of the LP. So you've got the lyrics, and you've got the only real bit of imagery is that picture there, which is on the inside gatefold of Super, and then more lyrics. It's a very minimalist kind of cover, but also it's very easily identifiable. You think about things like Andy Warhol's bean cans, for example. It's the same kind of approach. As you look at that, you go, that is something from. And if someone said, well, which band would use that as a cover, and you'd probably, without even knowing, you go, Pet Shop Boys. You just would, because that's how it would be. There were 4 singles that were released from the album. As I've said before, the first one was the Pop Kids, which had its CD and its 12-inch release. The second single, by the way, I think this only got a release on CD, 20-something. The CD 20-something is backed with 2 tracks called The White Dress and Wiedersehen, which is, I think, German for goodbye. But also there's a bastardization of Wiedersehen, which is in the chorus, which when translated to German means as we go. And then it's got a remix by the Los Evo Jedi's remix of 20-something. This is an unexceptional single. It's okay. But really, at this point, I'm buying Pet Shop Boys CD single for the B-sides. There was a third single that was released, Say It To Me, which was, again, as you can see, you've kind of got a grey and pink, and you've got a silver and orange, which kind of indicates there's a conversation that's occurring in a text message fashion between 2 individuals that are here. Say It To Me has 2 B-sides. They're only on the CD single and the downloads. It's called Cloud in a Box and The Dead Can Dance. There's a Stuart Price remix of Say It To Me, and then there is one of the remixes of In a Sanctum, the Carl Craig C2 Juice remix, which doesn't really warrant much further investigation. On the 12-inch of Say It To Me, by the way, we have a number of remixes. We've got almost like a very distinct and chosen inner sleeve that goes against it, and then you open up the disc and it's a standard black vinyl. But at the same point, you're looking at this and you're going, that looks like a nice bit of design. All of this is designed with a single overarching kind of narrative thought next to it, where everything is created to form part of a wider whole. So you could lay all of these designs out, they'd almost tell a story. There was a vinyl-only 12-inch of Inner Sanctum. Here it is. That had the Carl Craig remix on the A-sides, 2 demos, and the album version on the B. I don't remember when this came out. I remember putting it technically mildly annoyed it wasn't released as a CD, but then the Carl Craig remix got a release later on. Again, this has an inner sleeve here, which looks almost like a coloured vinyl version of the record. And if they were being perhaps particularly sly, the record itself would have been on pink vinyl with a yellow, but it isn't. No, it's that instead. But again, Inner Sanctum, one of the finest Pet Shop Boys singles that there is. The 4th and final single to be released from the album was Undertow, as I've mentioned before. And Undertow only got a commercial release as a 12-inch. It also got a release as the shrink wrap CD that came with, I think, the 2017 version of Pet Shop Boys Annually, which you could order from their fan club for a limited period of time. Now, I think they underestimated demand, that this sold out very, very quickly. This was effectively issue 44 of the Pet Shop Boys fan club magazine, literally presented as annually, in an annual form, featuring Q&As, diary entries, backstage photographs, and generally a fascinating read, by the way. Absolutely fascinating read, this. Gives you a real insight into how the band operates. A lot of the text is by Chris Heath, who wrote the books Literally and Pet Shop Boys vs. America. And Undertow was included as a CD in there. In 2018, there was the Pet Shop Boys Annually, this time without a CD, which again follows the band on tour with lots of photographs and recording details and diary entries and so on and so forth. I saw the band on tour 5 times during this particular period. I saw the opening night of the Inner Sanctum show at the Royal Opera House. It was fantastic. It really was brilliant. Live debuts for a lot of songs. Old songs were played live for the first time, including In the Night, and it was just a fantastic experience. And also, of course, seeing the first night is that you were able to have the experience without seeing lots and lots of video on YouTube of what the show was like. So you weren't able to go, oh, I saw them do that on YouTube. Because I'm the kind of guy that watches the YouTube show, so I saw and experienced it the way that it was meant to be experienced, which was with my eyes in the room at the same time as about 1,000 other people. Inner Sanctum did a 4-night residency at the Royal Opera House in 2016, then went on tour. The tour went to arenas all across the world and theatres in some other parts as well. We went to see a show at the Birmingham National Indoor Arena in February 2017. I caught the orchestral show for the Teenage Cancer Trust in April 2017, where the band performed with an orchestra, which was one of the best Pet Shop Boys shows I've ever seen. And then I caught 2 nights at the Royal Opera House in June 2018. 2 nights at the Royal Opera House were filmed for the Inner Sanctum home video release, which came out in early 2019, which featured a Blu-ray, 2 audio CDs, and a DVD. And you got 2 complete live shows and one of the shows on CD. So I was present at 2 of the shows that were filmed for this release. And this is again, it's just they're great live. They really, really are. Almost as if they're kind of bemused observers watching the world pass them by whilst they're doing these shows. But it's a wonderful way of representing all of the band's back catalogue to have a new meaning, being 60-something men having gone through life and the trials and tribulations of being alive in this world at this time. The DVD and Blu-ray is brilliant. It really is. It captures exactly what it felt like to be there. Captured the sense of euphoria that I had and the sense of I'm experiencing something meaningful with somebody important to me when I went to the shows. Also, you can dance to it and it's lovely, good fun. 2 shows are on the Blu-ray and the DVD. There's the full-length show recorded at the Royal Opera House. Again, the Inner Sanctum show, the reprise of the residency. This was the T-shirt they sold at the Royal Opera House show. It says House Music with the Royal Opera House on it, and on the back it's got PSB ROH 2016 written on it. But there's 2 shows. One, you get the full-length kind of presentation at the Opera House in 2018. The other show is the cut-down, hour-long version, which the band toured through festivals in late 2017. This particular show being filmed, I think, at Rio in October 2017 with slightly different arrangements of some of the songs. It's a lovely experience, actually. It's the 4th live Pet Shop Boys release that I've been present at the recording of. I was present at the Trafalgar Square show that was released for a fan club disc, Performance in 1991, the Brixton Academy show in 2007 that's on the Warchild DVD, the Pandemonium show at the O2 Arena in 2009, and this one. So I'm well aware I am a lucky bastard, but it's better to know that than not. The tour came to a close with a mild reprise of some shows in 2019. I think they played 4 shows in Japan and a couple of shows in London, and then that was it. And then the last part of the super period came with the publication of Neil Tennant's book, 100 Lyrics and a Poem. He'd been asked to write his autobiography, which he declined. He said, well, really, the autobiographical element can all be found in the lyrics. And 100 Lyrics and a Poem, if you are a Pet Shop Boys fan, is well worth investigating. It presents all of the band's lyrics, alphabetical by song title, and kind of talks through the rationale and the reason behind all of those songs. And it goes right from the very first demo tape all the way through up to Neil's preferred lyrics on the Super album. It starts with a certain Je ne sais quoi, which is one of the best B-sides ever, has a lovely daft lyric, and ends on Song 100, Your Funny Uncle, alongside a previously unpublished poem. If you're a fan of the written word of Pet Shop Boys, this is a book to get. It's an essential read in understanding how everything fits together. So that's Pet Shop Boys' 18th album, Super, which I really rate very, very highly indeed. I think it's a really strong album. The only thing about it which I would change would be the sequence of the songs that are on the album. I'd change the sequence. Everything else I'd leave absolutely the same. I just put the long version of Pop Kids on there as well. It adds an extra minute and a half to the album, but it really has a narrative flavour and envelope around the rest of the songs. This is obviously a considerably happier, considerably more cheerful episode than the one where I talked about Oasis. I am not always a grumpy old sod. And hopefully you can tell by the records that I talk about is that sometimes I like nothing more than to be in a dark room bouncing around to daft silly music that sounds like it was made by computers. And hopefully one day when I grow up I'll get to be a drum machine. That wraps it up. I will post links down there to the shows which are available. I think Rio is on YouTube. I think part of the Royal Opera House show is on YouTube. The orchestra show in 2017 is on YouTube, and I really, really, really loved that show. It was fantastic to see them play songs that they very rarely play with an orchestra, and some very important and meaningful songs were played at that show, including It Couldn't Happen Here. And It Couldn't Happen Here was the song that I listened to and went, that's it. That's my band, when I was 14 years old. And here I am 34 years later, and I still haven't grown up. I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you for making it this far. If you watch the whole thing, I will see you all again soon. Stay beautiful, and of course, stay super. Which, if I'd been particularly more cynical, I would have stay super. So there you go. So stay super, and I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.